Very good. Welcome, George, to Driven NYC. So you are the CEO of Hebbia. Hebbia was founded in 2020 with a mission to reinvent the way we work. So we're going to talk about what that means. Since then, you have raised $30 million across 3 rounds of financing from people that people here may have heard of, like Peter Thiel, Jerry Yang, founder of Yahoo, Ram Sriram, one of the first investors in Google, and also our friends at Index Venture, including Mike Volpe, who spoke at this event, actually in this room, exactly where he's sitting. So congratulations on starting the company and all the success so far. So I'd love to start with your journey. You were like a research scientist, you've done all sorts of interesting things. So walk us through the journey that led to starting the company.
Yeah, happily. And I'll have to send Mike a picture so that he can see us up here. I think the genesis of Hebbia begins pretty far back when I was a PhD student, and I was one of the few math students who actually wanted to teach. And what they did was they threw me in a class, which is pretty famous at Stanford, called Math 51. Where there's, many hundreds of students. It kind of reminds me of this hall. And I got to see those students as they kind of left Stanford, continued on their careers. And years later or months later or whatnot, whenever I synced back in with them, probably the most common job outside of working at FANG was, I'm going to go work I'm going to be a knowledge worker. I'm going to go work at Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs. And I had some of my most brilliant students do this, actually savant level mathematicians that I was scared of would end up, in these other roles. And when I would think back, they would be, you could see in their face, in their micro expressions that they had not smiled in months, and some of them, had gone through like physical transformations. It was really, really bad. And the thing that Stanford scratches into your head, kind of imprinted over and over and over again in every entrepreneurial class is, build a company where there's a lot of pain. And I had never seen like such smart people going through so much hell, like doing such stupid things over and over and over again. And, I said, well, this is a good place to build a company, and forgot about it. And I continued on my research. I was a computational neuroscientist. I was just kind of, heads down. I'm going to be an academic. To me, professors made more money than God. And, I was really excited to be a professor. And at one point, some of my friends in the lab that I was working on started to show me the earliest transformers. This is like 2016, 2017. And there was a distinct moment where I remember them doing something that I'd never seen done before. And I kind of freaked out. And then I saw it again when Google Translate got really good. I kind of freaked out again. And then my friends started to apply it to search, to neural information retrieval, and I kind of freaked out again. And I freaked out 3 times, and I said, okay, there's something here. Long story short, I ended up creating a Jupyter notebook, which ran a very early version of a neural information retrieval model, and I gave it to some of my former students that were working in the Morgan Stanley Menlo Park office to look over one type of document called the DefM14A. I don't know if many of you know what that document is. It's like 400 pages long. It's, kind of really, really gnarly to process. And they started to copy the Jupyter notebook and paste it and copy and paste it. And apparently a bunch of people that I'd never met started to use this software. And at one point it kind of hit me, there's this huge amount of pain. This is a thing that I've heard about 3 times. I think it's a good time to bet on large language models. And I said, hey, I'll take a leave of absence. And I have never gone back from that leave of absence. So, the genesis of Hebbia and kind of the product that we built is all around taking the smartest people in the world that do very silly, mundane, honestly stupid tasks and using the power of large language models to help them not have to do that.
Great. What a great story. Yeah. Turning this into fast forwarding to today, what does Hebbia do?
So yeah, there's kind of a product evolution as time has gone on and we've refined that customer pain. And what we noticed was, people didn't want to have to learn how to run a Jupyter notebook if they were bankers. And a lot of the time, people didn't really just want a simple search index like a Chroma or Pinecone database or whatnot, and some generative response over them. The people that really were power users of Hebbia wanted more than anything else to wrangle large language models and apply them in different ways in almost like a WYSIWYG fashion. And so what we built was a productivity tool. It started off being very geared towards search and neural information retrieval and making that readily available to everyone. And then kind of as people added more and more features, we built out a suite of different large language model tools where anyone with no technical training can wrangle them and wrangle any documents to get any sort of output, whether it's an ETL pipeline, whether it's a search that you'd like to expose to users, whether it's a chatbot that we can spin up for enterprises in 2 seconds, or even just other ways to extract and find data that you might like. So the one line is we're the first large language model native productivity tool. Yeah.
Okay, so how does that manifest then for your customers? How do they deploy the product to do what? What are some of the use cases you observed?
A really similar analog to what Hebbia does actually harkens back to Excel in 1985, where Excel took a technology, the SQL database, and allowed just normal humans to wrangle it in an application and create value. And they started in a niche in fixed income, and now governments run on Excel, and in 2,000 years, archaeologists will be looking at Excel files, and to me, it's actually the most important software to ever have been made. On a similar vein, I think that large language models are this new, very powerful technology like SQL once was. And we're trying to build Hebbia to be just like Excel, honestly, a way to programmatically wrangle in a WYSIWYG way those large language models. And so what that means is it's an application that you can have in your browser or on your computer, and you can have any documents that are easily ingestible, and you could have any large language models that are kind of easily loadable over those documents, and you could run different workflows.
So it's a bring your own large language model kind of thing. So if I'm, a bank and I want to deploy, or an asset manager, I want to deploy Hebbia, I can pick and choose the models, or does it come with battery included?
It comes with batteries included, but you can also pick or choose your models.
Okay.
And I think the thing that's very interesting is no one really cares what the back end of Excel looks like. It just works, And it's really easy to get data into Excel. And it's really easy to run analyses and get data out of Excel in the form that you'd like. And for Hebbia, a lot of the technology that we built, a lot of what's proprietary is actually that input and output flow, and then that flexibility.
And then do you need to customize per use case within an enterprise and then per vertical, or is it so powerful that you don't?
We have not. So we work with many of the largest asset managers. We work with many banks. We work with the US government. And we have not needed to fine tune or, kind of personalize any part of the software in the same way where that would be kind of, crazy to be like fine tuning Microsoft Word. We've tried to build these things in a way that's very easy to use for anything.
Okay. As I was prepping for this, there were some use cases that were mentioned on the website around, let's see, financial due diligence, market research, knowledge management. Do you want to talk to those?
Yeah, so DefM 14As wasn't the end all be all from those earliest days, and honestly, we spent a very long time trying to find the perfect market niche, our equivalent to fixed income, where Excel in like the span of 18 months took over 90% of the fixed income industry, and like everyone was using it, and they started using it for everything else. And so it's like, where could this technology be immediately leveraged, where we could go to market, where we could take over 90% of the market as fast as possible, and then go and be leveraged for other things? And the way that, you know, our team really thought about it was, hey, these large language models and the tool that we've created is very good at mapping from one ontology to another ontology. You know, one set of unstructured data, some taxonomy, some set of files into, hey, here's a list of questions and a list of answers. And in private equity due diligence, you have a data room, which has all of a company's files. And it's your job as a private equity analyst or a third party to come in and fill out 100 or 400 question long tracker that has all these questions about a business. So in private equity, there's no numbers or reporting or anything else. It's all in the structured data. And you have the people that are the highest paid, that hate their lives the most, whose jobs is entirely to, hey, go map from this data room about a company to, you know, this set of criteria that dictates whether or not we pour hundreds of millions of dollars into it. And so we started there. And so, you know, we've kind of gone to market with many of the largest asset managers in North America and now Europe. And we solve basically their most pressing pain. How do you deploy more capital more quickly in a more accurate fashion? And 6 months ago, there wasn't a single private equity CEO who'd, you know, even talk about Hebbia. And now they're all like, oh, I need a large language model strategy. And I've heard that my team is getting beat by this other team that has it. And it's helping us go to market really, really fast, which is quite good.
Now, are you finding that the best deployment method for this is a co-pilot kind of analogy, or are you actually enabling people to just replace those unhappy analysts?
So I think the thing that I like fundamentally very much believe, which maybe the kind of the last demo, you know, made me believe a little bit less, but you know, is that humans are really, really important. And making humans better is actually the ultimate goal of what I do. And if you look at, you know, I'm going to harken back to Excel once again. Bookkeeping before Excel and the structured database was literally in books. You know, it was a spreadsheet is called that because the spreadsheet was spanned over the 2 different pages. And so you'd open up a big book and you'd see a spreadsheet. And when this technology came out and when it was easily available in these productivity tools, people's jobs changed, and their job actually became, hey, I'm not going to use a slide rule and, you know, all kinds of calculators to do my job, and instead I'll use a computer. And I think Hebbia is very similar. Like, we are building a tool that is aligned with humans and aligned with creating value. And I think, you know, to date, not a single job has been replaced by Hebbia, you know, knock on wood. Yeah. But, you know, I think one day there will be many more jobs that are created to run on Hebbia.
Sure. You alluded to some of this already, and look, I don't know how much you can sort of disclose, but do you want to talk a little bit about what's under the hood in terms of what you build, how it works, what was hard, what turned out to be easy, like anything you can share on a more technical level?
Yeah, I'm happy to take questions as well. I don't know if that's something we...
Yeah, well, we can do this afterwards.
Yeah,
like maybe start and then
the 3 buckets that I can definitely talk to are input, output, and then flexibility. And these are all the kind of different things we've done a lot of R&D into. One thing I am obsessed about is not being replaced by an increasingly large language model, or better language model. So, you know, kind of side anecdote today, OpenAI released, as many people thought they would, a new API that allowed you to call functions, right? And so it's a kind of big thing, and you know, there's a ton of startups that had done a lot of work into doing R&D around how to create a tool form or implementation, yada, yada, yada. And they released this today, and you know, that works some. So, what I care a lot about is how do I build tooling and functionality around a large language model to make it much better. On the input side, just like there's entire companies, industries even, built around getting data into a SQL database. We've done a lot of work on integrations, on parsing documents, on actually creating multiple types of indexes to make sure that these models have access to good information in a way that actually matters. On the output side, we've done a lot of work to find ways to actually successfully programmatically wrangle them to get to outputs that our users want, and to do that in a generalizable way where the user is still in control of what that output looks like. And then on the flexibility side, it's a beautiful product, in my opinion, that allows people to very easily understand what they're doing, right? And there's a lot of work into building reliability and trust for end users, because people just don't by default trust the output of a large language model. And if their job is on the line, if they're allocating a ton of money or they're making a mission critical decision, it matters that they're right.
Okay, and thank you. And then in terms of actual features, again, as I was prepping for this, I jotted down things like question lists, table extraction, semantic alerts. You want to talk about those, and maybe also what's on the roadmap?
Yeah, so those are all things that we do. So we expose a neural search chatbot. We allow you to compare two documents semantically, which is a pretty hard problem that we're pretty excited to have solved. As I mentioned before, for the private equity diligence case and other use cases where you're mapping between two ontologies, we allow you to create an output, like a question list or something even more complex. And you could say, hey, go fill this all out. And then we run an asynchronous operation to execute all of those tasks.
Yeah. Is an input and then you get the answers as an output? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So if it's about mapping between one taxonomy and another taxonomy, we can have a large language model do that very successfully. Yep. And that's not just an information retrieval task. A lot of the time it's contextual and it's self-referential, which is pretty interesting. In terms of alerts, a lot of our customers care a lot of the time that, hey, when something new comes in, they're aware of it, even if they don't have a alert. So Google has alerts where every time someone mentions Hebbia, our marketing team can get notified. For Hebbia, if I want every time we get sent a new contract, I want to know who the contract's with, who the senior stakeholder is, what the fees are, and what our updated customer concentration is. This is just for my internal use case. I can set an alert to do that. And every time we sign a new contract, I, as a CEO, know what the salespeople have agreed to in terms of terms, which is pretty fun. So that's some of the features.
Yeah, great. I mean, obviously, it's a very exciting moment in technology right now, and there's so many things that are suddenly possible. Are you finding that there are actually things that generative AI is not good at doing in the realm of what it is that you would want to do for your customers? You're like, you know what, we're not quite there yet from not just Hebbia, but like from an overall technology perspective.
It's very funny. The generative AI hype, in my experience as a generative AI, I guess, CEO, has been very much, no one knows what I'm talking about. And then all of a sudden, everyone's asking me about something. And then they all think they can do it themselves with their own internal database and their developers. And then now, it's now this part of the cycle where everyone's coming back to me and they're saying, oh, this is very difficult. And it's a gift. Actually, I had a CTO of our largest customer explain that to me the other day. And I think what many people are finding is that the technology is very, very good, right? It's adequate. It's good at doing very simple tasks. But, when you start to do these tasks where it requires multiple steps or this programmatic wrangling of things, it's not a prompt. It's not going to be LangChain and the right logical operators. Like, none of this stuff is actually going to solve it. And that's because, if you have a 90% good system and then another 90% good system and then another 90% good system, and then, your output is the sum, or rather the product of all those 90% good systems, you're going to have something that is 10% good, depending on how many steps you have. And so what we're finding is that these models are good at first order tasks, right? You can get 90% good at a first order task. They don't quite have the context window, which will be solved, the contextualization, kind of the repeated back and forth that allows them to solve nth order tasks in a very general way. I think context windows will solve some part of it, but being able to programmatically run them is so important. And it's not just creating some logical tree of operators in LangChain and then having the right Pinecone database hooked up. It's about how do I get each of these steps to not be 90% accurate, but 100% accurate, 99.959 accuracy. So.
Great. All right. Last question from me, and then I want to open up to folks here. Looking forward, Hebbia in a couple of years, where do you want to be? What do you want to be building and doing?
I often joke about internally that if we stay in financial services, I will have failed. I think, I really value the go-to-market of productivity tools that started in a vertical but built something and had a product vision all along that was generalizable. And a lot of the time I've actually made hard calls where I could have made a smaller cut, a simpler cut to just serve our ICP, our initial customer profile. I actually chose not to do that and build something more broad. So we're starting to serve law firms, we just started to serve the government in a bigger capacity. I care that when my children are in 6th grade and they're in computer science class, in their system tray, they have to learn how to use Google Chrome, how to use Microsoft Excel, and how to use Hebbia. And anything less than that would, I'd be remiss. So,
great, love it. All right, do we have questions? Yep.
Earlier you mentioned it's important to demonstrate user trust, right? So they understand how you're actually generating the outputs. So especially when you have these complicated workflows and someone's potential job on the line as a PE analyst, if they make an important error, obviously that's so for them to get to trust the output and the entire workflow process, other than just saying, hey, here's the piece of original text that we're sourcing it from, and just giving that as an example, how are you doing that trust in a multi-step way?
That's a great question. And frankly, I think it's, it continues to be the thing that the people in charge of our user experience think about the most. It's definitely not how to make something beautiful. It's how to make someone believe that they're seeing everything. And there's some really good things that you can use large language models for. So, let's go back to Chroma and do a semantic search example. If you really have a good semantic search system, if I search for something like what are the risks to the business, I'll also see underneath everything where it says risks, everything where it talks about businesses, everything is even remotely semantically similar, and then things that you otherwise would not have seen. You can actually create an infinitely long set of things, right? So I actually can look through the entire data room or the entire document just ranked by relevance, even after there's no keyword matches. So if historically you were just command F'ing for risks, and now I can see in my third result, management is concerned about this large contract not going through. And when I demo that, people freak out because the app itself is actually showing them, it's more trustworthy, it's showing them everything. And it's the user's prerogative to scroll as far as they'd like and say, hey, now it's really, not getting cut off. A little interesting tidbit about, relevance and similarity, cosine similarity scores. When we used to just do, something like a Chroma index or whatever, we would include the cosine similarity score in the thing. And people would freak out. They'd be like, what does 72% similar mean? Or, what does very relevant mean? And we actually ended up removing those scores and using other types of indicators to help people understand what they were seeing and when knowledge cutoffs were gone. And we noticed that it was actually really important to use systems of old like traditional BM25, TF-IDF kind of keyword matching algorithms to show them results alongside and make these users believe they were still seeing everything. So it was kind of this combination of new tech better, old tech still showing you everything. Here's some scoring that we can demonstrate from a UI perspective. Here's a bunch of additional steps that can help you have assurance, even that we can just do generatively, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Go.
Hi.
I'm sorry.
Right over here.
Hi.
Hi, thank you for the talk. You had mentioned that outside of the deep functionality that Hebbia offers, that it's also just a beautiful product. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more on some of the innovation in the UI and UX that you and your team have done. And then the second part of the question is, I'm curious what some of the user feedback has been so far. I know you've been focused on financial services and government as well. Having a lot of complex information that they need Hebbia and rely on Hebbia to analyze and get answers. Do you see a world in which over time the end user may not even have to ask a specific question, but insights and answers to questions they may not have even thought to ask are revealed to them?
So we've got a 3-part question there, and I'm probably going to forget 2 of the 3. So you wanted to know a little bit about the UX UI, and then you wanted to know kind of are we going to surface stuff ahead of time, so just be on top of it. That's a little bit on the semantic alert side. And then the second thing you asked was what user feedback has been. I'll answer the first 2 in one, right? Which has been probably the sweetest thing in the world for me. Was developers, internal people tasked with running large language model applications in an ad hoc way for their companies or enterprises, started to use Hebbia to prototype those applications and to really quickly do a POC, just as you could prototype a database in Excel, or a database table rather in Excel. And when we started to see that happening, it was like, hey, this is so easy to use. It makes so much sense that even the people that know how to run these things, that know how to make an API call and wrangle them in any way they'd like, are using this themselves. I think there's, you can have your Vim versus VS Code analogy. If a lot of people use VS Code now, some people are staunch, Vim, Emacs people. When we started to see some developers start to use Hebbia, I knew that there was sufficient kind of ease of use. A lot of it has been understanding where large language models are and what they're doing and communicating that to the user. And part of that has been just like how we load things, how we walk through steps, how tools appear on the front end, how a user can feel agentic when they can select a table and a document and then go ask questions about the table. So it's kind of hard to verbalize because it's so visual. But that's some of it. And then the last thing was, are we surfacing stuff by themselves, like by itself? And I'd say I don't really care that much about surfacing things that people aren't interested in, because there's always going to be something that's an outlier. Right, like if I just took a data set and I said, here are all your outliers, it's actually less helpful than saying, hey, across this principal component, I want to know what's an outlier. And so kind of back to the whole human in the loop paradigm, I think it's very important to have a human in the loop and say, hey, like I need to compare these 2 documents, or I need to know what documents don't have this right legal clause in them. And then I have to go and renegotiate those contracts or something like that. And that's stuff that Hebbia can do and already does. It can alert you when stuff isn't right or out of domain, but you still have to kind of provide the principal component of meaning that you want to check that on.
One last one, and then I'll let people connect directly because I want folks to have a little bit of time to just meet one another after this as well. Just one last one over there.
Hey George, great chat so far.
Thank you.
My ex-roommate was a really early member of Clean, and they just announced Clean Chat.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how does this differ from what Glean is doing?
So I personally love Glean. I actually think we're internally procuring Glean at Hebbia. So it's, I think Glean is a wonderful piece of software. I think that Glean has optimized for a lot of integrations and user experience centered around search in an enterprise, but then also primarily, startup first way. And I see it right now as an application of search, neural information retrieval, large language models, as applied to company startup search. And they do it, they're world-class at it. I'm a big fan of their technology. At the same time, I care that, Hebbia is not just one application, that we're building a productivity tool. So whereas you could say, hey, I could do my bookkeeping in Excel, or I could, do it in some specialized accounting software. A lot of the time people go with the accounting software or will build something in-house to do that, right? So I think I'd say that Hebbia is more general purpose. It's more wrangleable for anything. And a lot of the time we're helping analysts do research projects rather than helping people find their company documents. Hopefully that adds a little bit of color.